It's always funny. We always talk about trades, right, Matt? And we're like, well, they just trade with this team. It's like, well, that team also has to want to do the trade. Like, so like, you can't just be like, hey, you're trading with us.
It's like saying, I'm just going to marry Scarlett Johansson. Like, she has to say yes, right? And so it's like, yeah, we'll just trade up. It's not that easy, guys. It's really not.
Yeah. Hey, everyone, welcome back to the Buffalo Plus YouTube channel. Once again, joined by our recurring guest. We got to get you some swag, man, because you've been a part of Buffalo Plus. I think this is the third or fourth time you've been on. It's Matt Miller, ESPN draft expert, analyst, guru, whatever you want to call him. Thanks again for coming on, man. I appreciate it.
You know, I've never been to Buffalo, so I think we just make this right. I'll come up. You can just give me some wings and some local beer, and we'll call it even.
And we'll do it in the studio. How about that? We'll knock this whole thing off.
Great.
I appreciate it as always. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe to the video. Matt Miller, if you don't follow him already on Twitter at NFL Draft Scout, great follow. And that's where I want to start here, Matt. A lot of talk about wide receivers. And the first thing I want to talk about is your tweet actually from earlier today, because we all talk about how deep this wide receiver draft class is. And maybe it is, but it's really heavy at the top. Your tweet talks about how you have 19 wide receivers in your top 100, only 12 wide receivers from 100 to 205, and then a whole bunch of guys after that. I guess can you go a little bit more off of your tweet of just saying it's kind of stacked at the top?
It is like, and I think, you know, I was running through my final rankings posted Sunday. You could find those on ESPN.com. And I was looking at those, trying to find like, where are the sweet spots for each position? And it was like, my goodness, this wide receiver group is loaded at the top, but it is very much like, if you think about a teeter-totter, like all that talent is in the first 100. And then there is a significant drop-off. So, and I've caught myself saying this too, of like, oh, it's in a historic wide receiver class. It is at the top, but it is not when we're not talking about, you know, in round 3, I only have 5 wide receivers in the 3rd round. So you got 14 in the first 2 rounds. And so I think for a lot of teams, they look at a mock draft or they look at things we write and they say, man, I'll just wait till the 3rd or 4th round to get a receiver. I have 8 wide receivers ranked in the 3rd and 4th round. That's it. And there are a heck of a lot of teams that need wide receivers, right? And so it's almost like trying to set expectations a little bit for fan bases of, hey, if you want a wideout, this is the year to do it. You better do it in the first 64 picks. Otherwise, you're getting somebody who's probably like a slot receiver, you know, which there's a heck of a lot of value there. Those are great players, but you're not expecting to get a starting X wide receiver in the 3rd round this year. And in the 4th round, you're definitely not. And then after that, there is a very significant drop off. You know, there are position groups like center, tight end, safety, off-ball linebacker. You can get starters on day 3 this year. A wide receiver, there's going to be like 1 or 2. It always happens, but I would not feel comfortable waiting very long after pick 64 if I needed a wide receiver.
Well, I don't know if you know this. The Bills need a wide receiver. And they just traded away this Stephon Diggs guy who is pretty good.
Yeah.
So I don't think that they have a shot, obviously. And I think we talked at the combine, the fact of the top 3 guys are probably off the board with Marv, Neighbors, and Odunze. Can we play a scenario just hypothetically where the Bills make a move? Could they get into the top 10 to make a move to get Odunze? And hypothetically, how awesome would his fit be?
I mean, the fit is fantastic. I mean, he would be, you know, like Jamar Chase is for the Bengals. That was my player comp for him. Like, that's the type of player you're getting. He's a dog on and off the field. He's a great person. He's a leader. He's a finished product. He has yards after the catch, but he's a bully at 215 pounds. I mean, he is a prototypical X wide receiver. I saw someone say he's Terrell Owens without the off field. It's like, yeah, that's a pretty accurate way to put it, right? So it's like, yeah, that's what you want. Now, to get him though, you might have to get to 7 overall, honestly, because you're going to have to get in front of the Chicago Bears at 9. And I don't know that the Falcons would trade out of 8 because they need help on defense so badly. So the hard part for Buffalo is, and Kansas City ran into this last year too, 2 things. Number 1, you're really good. No one wants to help you. Number 2, you're drafting at the end of the round every year. So even if you said, hey, we'll give you 28 and a 2025 first. Okay, well, that 2025 first is going to be a late first rounder. So there's not as much value to where, like what Chicago and Carolina did last year, where Chicago's GM Ryan Poles said, hey, we'll take the Panthers first because we think they're going to suck next year. And we got a shot that this is a pretty high pick in the round. With Buffalo, you know how good they're going to be year in and year out. And so you're really locked into, best case scenario, that pick's 25 in the first round in the future. So if you want to try to get up to 7 to get Rome Odunze, like, you are paying a lot to do that. And that's what makes it so much harder to envision a scenario like that.
I was really hoping Chicago would get like offensive line help for Caleb or something like that in my Mayberry head of being like, well, because my next question was, could he fall to 12? And we'll just skip that
No.
question and we'll just
Nah,
keep
he
moving.
won't. Sorry. Yeah.
We'll just keep moving right along. Those are
Yeah.
the top 3 guys. Then there's the next tier that we've talked about. How much of a difference is there between Brian Thomas Jr. and that next bunch that kind of seems to be the guys in the first round?
Yeah, from the top 3 to Brian Thomas Jr., the biggest difference is he's a one-year wonder. His 1 year was amazing. 17 touchdowns, led everybody in FBS. He had a great year. The difference is it was 1 year. And I think you could say the same thing for AD Mitchell from Texas, who was a Georgia transfer. AD was like a one-year guy with awesome production. So that's what you worry about. That's why they're not in that same group as the top 3. It's just we didn't get to see it enough, right?
Mm-hmm.
Brian Thomas Jr., Adonai Mitchell, I have the exact same grade on them, 93 overall. I think they're
Wow.
both like around 17, 18 on my big board. So they should be gone. By the 20s, they're going to be off the board, right? Now,
Okay.
like, where the run on wide receivers happens, that second run is a great question. It could be, it could be in the teens. It could be in the 15. The Colts could take one. I think you have to think about Jacksonville 17, Cincinnati 18, Pittsburgh 20. Like, you have to consider those teams. But it's a lot easier to get from 28 to 19 than it is 28 to 7, right? Like that. Now we're talking about something that's actually feasible to do.
Mm-hmm.
And certainly with, like, I do mock draft exercises all the time just to check myself. There are a lot of times like AD Mitchell is still on the board at 28 because so many teams go tackle or so many teams go
Yeah.
pass rusher. And so a really good wide receiver happens to fall to 28. So I think that's one of those spots where obviously you got to make these trades when you're on the clock, when that team's on the clock, because you need to know who's there. But if I'm Buffalo, like, I don't panic. I would wait and see. Okay, when Brian Thomas Jr. or wide receiver 4 comes off the board, I think that's when you start to be like, all right, now we've probably got to make a move now to get a wide receiver.
How high up do you think the Bills and Bean can get? Because look, push comes to shove, Beans, we know how aggressive he is on draft days.
Yeah,
How high do you think they can get without mortgaging too much to get that guy? I guess I look at Denver at 12, but maybe that's still too much. Is there a sweet spot when
probably.
you're doing
Yeah.
when you're doing some of your mocks that you're saying, hey, Buffalo should be pinpointing and kind of having this guy this team penciled in as, hey, get ready to call them at this point?
Yeah, I do think Denver at 12 is possible. If they wanted to trade back and get a quarterback at better value, because
Yeah.
like taking Bo Nix or Michael Penix Jr. at 12 is tough. But
Yeah.
so they could be a team that's on the move. I also look at the Saints at 14. Like, the Saints have some clearly defined needs, but at 14, like, if they could stay there and take a tackle, absolutely. But I think you at least call the Saints because they're another team that has always been willing to move. They've been aggressive. But I think that 2025 second round pick might be really valuable to them. They could be in 2025 thinking about quarterbacks, and having that extra second round pick could be really valuable, and having to move up the board to get one of those players potentially. So I would target teams like that, New Orleans, Seattle, teams that could use that future draft capital because they know that they might be in it for a quarterback next year.
All right. 2 guys that I think have some cons against them, maybe one other than one different than the other. AD Mitchell. Is there concern about the effort or the rumors? Because I know this is also smokescreen season where everybody's kind of talking out the side of their mouth and kind of seeing what people are actually going to believe and things like that. Do you see any concern about Mitchell? Because physically he looks like just a freak with his route running and his speed.
Yeah. I think there are times where if he knew the ball wasn't coming his way, you probably weren't getting max route effort. I think that's a pretty normal college thing. So it's not to the point of like, I'm worried about it. It's just, okay, well, someone's just going to have to light a bit of a fire under him. And also to understand in the NFL, like, there's not as many designated, hey, the ball's not coming your way. You have to be ready every down because of pressure and packages and things like that. So I don't worry about that so much. With him, my biggest concern would be there are times his hands are late to the party. Now, he only had one drop, but there are times like he's got to speed up his process a little bit.
Okay.
So if I were going to say I have a concern about him, it's more so that than hey, he's going to take some routes off every now and then when he knows the ball is going to Xavier Worthy on a bubble screen on the other side of the field. he might not even come out of his stance sometimes. But again, that's a pretty easy coaching point.
Again, I appreciate your time. I got 3 quick more guys, and then we'll let you on your way. I appreciate it as always. Is Keon Coleman boom or bust?
I don't think so. I think Keon could be a really good number 2 receiver. And the way that that guy contributed on special teams tells me that he's going to just be a damn good football player. Like, to go from Michigan State to Florida State, have immediate success, and still be a punt returner, like, to be out there willing to do that tells me
Yeah,
so much about who he is as a person. So I feel better about him than I did guys like Traylon Burks, who's like a similar
sure.
body type. Like, give me Keon Coleman, and I'm even talking like without the benefit of hindsight. Let's go back in time 2 years. I would take Keon Coleman over Traylon Burks every day of the week.
Is he a guy that the Bills could stay at 28 and not have to if they can't find a partner?
Yeah, absolutely. Xavier Legette is another guy in that
Yeah.
same window, I think, and different players, but both guys who can win on slant routes. They're going to win with 50-50 balls. They're going to beat people up with their bodies, so they're going to give you more of that physical route runner. I hate that I make this comp so often, but it gives you that AJ Brown or that Debo Samuel, the guy who can
Yeah.
just go win physically one on one. They're not going to run over the top of somebody with their speed, but they're gonna post people up, for lack of a better word.
A guy that we talked about at the combine that once you talked about him, I fell in love with him too. And I know you're in love with him. Why isn't Javon Baker a first round prospect?
Oh man, I guess like the lack of production, being a transfer player, but I do love him. I really do. And it's funny, I talk to, a lot of different scouts for a lot of different teams, and now everyone knows that I love him. So it's gonna be fun to see where he lands. I know I'm gonna get some texts whenever he gets drafted. Hopefully it's on night 2. But the way he tracks the ball in the red zone is I think when you do my job, you find like one thing you love about every prospect. And it kind of becomes like your trademark when you're talking about them. And that's is he tracks the ball so well in the red zone. So I'm still holding out hope. I know wide receiver got moved up the Bills' list of needs since the last time we talked, but still holding out hope that he lands with a team like Buffalo where he can come in and just dominate early on.
I love it. He was the guy that we talked about, and I was like, all right, I'm gonna go home and watch this guy from UCF, and all of a sudden was like,
Yeah.
damn. Like, you're right. Like, every
You
time
see
you watch
why
him,
he was at Alabama.
yeah.
You're like, oh, yeah, okay.
And
There's
you
the
were right.
talent.
Like, I think when we were talking, you're like, I just kept underlining him. Like, every time I watched him, it was like, oh my gosh,
Yeah.
all this stuff. Maybe more of a flyer guy, Ryan Flournoy. He did a visit with Buffalo. What can you
Yeah.
tell us about this crazy story prospect guy, and where could he fit in the NFL?
Yeah, he's from the opposite side of Missouri from me, so I've actually seen him play a little bit.
Gotcha.
But he's one of those dudes. Like, there's a lot of pro caliber traits to his game. It's
Mhm.
just the level of competition. It's almost impossible to judge that, right? But I mean, he catches the ball well. He's got really good speed. He does a great job working back to the quarterback when he has to. The route running at that level, unfortunately, you can just win being an athlete. And so, like, he's got to
Yeah.
work on that. Just the crispness of his routes have to get better. But this is a dude with, like, I mean, really good testing time. He ran a 4.35 at his pro day. I'm going off memory here, so I hope 4.35 at the pro day. But he had a 41-inch vert and like a 10.5 broad. Like, his pro day timing was fantastic. So when I look at the tape at a small school and then the pro day times, and this dude is rocked up. He's squatted over 500 pounds. Like, he is
Same.
strong. So I think those are yeah, same here, right? Those are the
Right.
traits I would want to take a round 5 flyer
Okay.
on. And the Bills have a ton of picks on day
Yeah.
3. So, like, why not? Like, why not take a chance on one of these dudes that worst case scenario is going to be an amazing special teams guy for you?
Yeah. I think the over under should be set at 2.5 for how many wide receivers I think Brandon Beane and the Bills come out of,
Yep.
Detroit with. One last one. If they don't go wide receiver in the first round, if they don't, and they go another position, is there another guy that you like that's not a wide receiver and they stay put? Maybe they couldn't find a trade partner. It's always funny. We always talk
Yeah.
about trades, right, Matt? And we're like, well, they just trade with this team. It's like, well, that team also has to
If
want to
only.
do the
Yeah.
trade. Like,
Right.
so like, you can't just be like, hey, you're trading with us. But say they can't find another partner, they can't get a deal. They're at 28 and 7 wide receivers have gone. Is there another position that you would like at 28 that fits Buffalo?
It's like saying, I'm just going to marry Scarlett Johansson. Like, she has to say yes, right? And so it's like, yeah, we'll just trade up. It's not that easy, guys. It's really not.
Yeah.
I think corner has to be in play. And
Okay.
I'm a fan of Christian Benford. I'm a fan of
Yeah.
Rasul Douglas, but I think you have to, like, if you're not going to go receiver, I think premium positions. I don't expect at 28 to there to be good value on the offensive line. I think that's going to be picked over. So
Okay.
yeah, would love to go offensive line. I think it's going to be picked over at that point. So I think corner like Kool-Aid McKinstry, Innis Rakestraw, those are two players that I would consider like not a consolation prize, but like if you can't somehow get a wideout, then you get a corner that you believe in that can be, a top tier player, be the guy Kyer Elam was supposed to be.
I
It
didn't
could
think
be
you'd
an every
say it.
down player.
I didn't think
Had
you
to
were
do
gonna
it.
say.
Sorry.
We all have like
He's great in
PTSD.
the playoffs is the weird thing though. Like
Yeah.
if you could just, or he gets picks. I shouldn't say he's great. He's productive in the playoffs.
Yeah. I was going to say, I was like, I think we all have PTSD of drafting
Yeah.
cornerbacks at the end of the first round. Appreciate it as always. Matt, you're great. I appreciate your time. Enjoy the draft. I know this is like your Super Bowl. Appreciate your time as you've done at the combine, and I'm sure we'll catch up with again soon. So I really appreciate it.
Yeah, of course. Sounds good. Thank you.
Buffalo Plus, your interactive look at the week in football, brought to you by Connors and Ferris.